You are listening to the 80s Slasher Librarian. Keep listening, or I'll kill you.
There's a lover.
Jason X, to the Third Power, Chapter 4. After the chaos at dawn, Free decided to call a meeting for noon, waiving schedules for the day. He knew that the backtracking made him seem disorganized. In retrospect, he realized that he should have let everyone get accustomed to Elysium for a day or so, called a general meeting, presented an overview, and explained the project in more detail until he felt he was understood. He then should have listened to their opinions and concerns, set them at ease, delegated like crazy, and had them all work together for a few days until they were comfortable, and then break them up into shifts. In fact, he should have done all the things that he had learned in the computerized management course he took before coming to Elysium. Things that he, as team leader, was responsible for doing to instill confidence in his team members, in order to encourage them to work in harmony and to reach the project goals. But he had done none of that. He had just reacted, like some deranged animal that couldn't think or analyze, and could only push when he was shoved, sit when he was told to stand, and so on. It had taken him hours after that insane incident with Linda and Brad to get a grip. It was his fault. He had started out too loose and then tightened up too tight and too fast, and now he was seeing the results. Once he got over blaming himself for being a fool, he decided that he had to begin again. It was the only way to get them on track, and they were definitely not on track right now. So he'd called a meeting and told everyone that all schedules were canceled until the next half-dozen rotations of Elysium, which equaled to a day and a bit on Earth 2 time. And now he was headed toward the store to see what he could scrounge up for breakfast. That was another thing. They had no cook, so everyone would just fix and eat his or her own meals. But that meant no continuity around food. And the management course had stated that eating together was an important bonding experience. Eating together was a good thing. He sighed. Not so many good things were happening here. He hoped to change that. He met Anyar just inside the door, munching on the contents of a bag of cereal. "I hear they used to eat that stuff with milk and sugar," he said. "Really? That's so weird." "It's perfect as it is," she smiled, the first gesture of friendliness he'd received from anyone since meeting the team, and he felt grateful. He helped himself to a nutrition capsule, and then took a small veggie patty from the cryonic deep freeze and popped it under the decrystallizer. Within 3 seconds, the bag had puffed out, and when he opened it, the contents were steaming. "Sounds hot," Anyar said, between a mouthful of what appeared to be a mix of oats, bran, wheat, flakes, and something he couldn't identify. "You can hear heat?" "Just the sizzle." "It is hot. I need something warm in me today." "Want a plate?" "No, I'll wing it. We're at a camp, remember? Roughing it." They both laughed a bit, and Free felt a little better. Free walked to the door and left Anyar to munch on her breakfast in peace. He stepped out into the artificial sunlight. The sky above was a gorgeous blue. Virtual birds chirped, and he could see a simulation of bird bodies in flight in the distance. A slight wind blew, rippling the surface of the lake. It was warm, but not too hot, so Major Tom had gotten the temperature right. That's a plus. He'd like to explore this place, but that would have to come later. Maybe check out the lake from a less stressed perspective. He liked that lake, even though it was man-made. Somehow it called to him, as if it were familiar, like home even though it was the first lake he'd ever been near. Who knew what interesting things that lake held, real or virtual? He probably would need plenty of R&R later on, and the water seemed the perfect place for it. He had a few minutes, so he walked to the edge. The water was crystal clear, making him want to dive in. He saw clouds reflected in its surface, and he turned his gaze upward to a sky of perfect blue. And instantly his thoughts turned grim as he remembered Joe and the terrible accident. By Joe's own admission, that shuttle was a relic and had been in rough shape for a long time. The team had been mighty lucky to get off of it before it blew. Everyone was lucky, except for Joe. It made Free sad. It was an accident. It had to have been. Death lingered close by everyone, without them knowing about it, until the final encounter. Free's emotions told him that it was an accident, but his brain told him to be careful of writing it off as just an accident. "You know what the powers that be are plotting," came a familiar voice. "MT, if I didn't know better, I'd say you're paranoid, but I doubt a computer program can be paranoid." "Oh, you'd be surprised at what a computer program is capable of," the AI said. "No doubt," Free said. As he stared at the sky, he caught movement. Something far out in space beyond the dome was shifting like a falling star. But with this glaring daylight, he couldn't really tell what he saw. "It's the UUSA," Major Tom said. "What's a UUSA?" "The Universal Unmanned Space Ark. It's what they're using to empty the prison." "Ah, the sling." Free recalled the data that Jackson had showed him about the brilliant new technology. It was nicknamed the sling because it worked like one. The object moved like a pendulum, from one place to another while grounded in space. It literally catapulted objects from one place to the other, and was able to bypass gaseous rings that could be harmful to humans, like those on Thanos. Free had found the technology fascinating. The whole idea of moving anything this way was both an ancient and innovative approach. Simple but effective. Well, hopefully effective. As far as Free knew, other than a few limited tests, the sling hadn't actually transported people yet. At least not between such great distances. "You know what worries me, MT? They're moving people," he said, suddenly aware that he was getting into the habit of talking to the AI as if he were an alter ego. And in fact, Major Tom felt familiar somehow, as if it were a close buddy or even a parental figure that knew Free well. Maybe even a part of his brain. That was a laugh. "First time, from what I've been programmed to understand," said the AI. "So it works like a pendulum. The swing drops lower and lower and moves out further and further with each arc." "That's the idea." "But if it's constantly moving, how does it pick up cargo or people?" "The data I have indicates that when the pendulum swings to its farthest point, it pauses as it reaches the end of its swing. Then, when it begins to move again, it starts to swing back in the opposite direction. That pause, the wider the arc, the longer the pause, is enough time for cargo to be loaded or people boarded." "Amazing," Free said. "But what about wormholes? Doesn't the sling encounter those and have to get through different dimensions?" "Not in this sector of the sky. The distance between Elysium and Thanos is not much longer than that of Earth 2 to either. The pendulum cuts through space much as any object would, a rocket, a shuttle. Once the pendulum is set in motion at the power source, it not only has its own energy, but generates energy, which increases with the back and forth movement. A bit of accelerating perpetual motion, if you like." Free felt truly astonished. What a unique technology. He knew that Jackson's company had designed part of the swing mechanism, so he trusted that the hardware was solid. He wondered who built the software, and asked the AI. "Unknown." "How long until it gets here?" Major Tom responded instantly. "By Earth 2 time, a day in about 4 hours. By Moon Complex time, 2 days, 2 hours, 14 minutes and 16 seconds. Now, 14 seconds. "Where are they going to load the prisoners?" he asked. "I believe the UUSA has been programmed so that it will pause at the entrance to the dome over the military complex, just above the prison elevator, where most of the inmates were brought in." "Most of them?" MT did not answer, and before Free could question the AI further, he heard chatter on the wind and realized that the others were heading to the lab. He took a deep breath, turned, and walked that way. They were all waiting inside, facing the door when he entered, and suddenly he felt nervous again. Their eyes were expectant, judgments either formed already or about to be. Anyar, likely his only ally, stood near the glass doors to the sterile biolab. Next to her, wearing the dullest gray shirt and the brightest yellow pants that Free had ever seen, stood Herbert, appearing, as always, uncomfortable in his own body. Linda and Brad, dressed in their usual medieval drag, were talking and laughing together as if they were alone in the room. The 50 or so metal and shell bracelets Linda wore clinking together. These two faced one another, as if not noticing that Free was waiting for their attention. Skye sat at her console, intensely keying information into her computer, and virtually ignoring him and everyone else. Free paused for a heartbeat, transfixed by the crisp white blouse Skye wore, the fabric sheer as the cheesecloth his mother used when she baked summer cakes for his birthday. Under the low-cut fabric was just the hint of something dark, satiny and lacy, against her tightly tanned skin. "Are we having a meeting or what?" Linda finally snapped, pulling him back to the reason why he was here. He took another breath as he moved to put a workstation between himself and the others. He knew that he shouldn't feel defensive, but he did. "I wanted to get things sorted out before we begin." "Novel idea," Linda remarked, and Brad chortled. Even Herbert smiled. Free did not respond for the moment, but he felt if he wanted to lead this disparate group, he couldn't put up with disrespect forever. "First off, we're here to do a job. That's priority number 1. Second, from now on, the military complex is out of bounds to everybody." "And why is that?" Linda asked. "Because I say so." "Not good enough," Skye said, pausing in her work. "What's there that we have to avoid the place, besides the prison? Linda's monster?" "It's not a monster," Linda snarled. The word bitch was implied at the end of the sentence. "The reason," Free continued around the impending catfight, "is precisely because of the prison. Those inmates are being moved soon, and until they are, we need to keep a distance from the place." "So, how are they being moved again?" Anyar said. "By a sling or something?" "The Universal Unmanned Space Ark, UUSA, is an unmanned mode of transport which is going to pause at the dome opening atop the military complex. They'll be loaded in, and then the sling will drop back into the opposite direction and move them out of here." "Move them where?" Herbert asked, looking around, fearfully as if wondering if his questions were appropriate. Or maybe he was afraid of the idea of the prisoners being moved. "Earth 2's other moon, Thanos. I think Joe mentioned all of this." "He didn't tell us how they'll survive there," Herbert said, and Free had no idea, so he didn't answer. "Will they inhabit the entire moon?" Anyar asked. "Well, it's not that big of a moon," Free said. "They set up an interlocking dome system there, similar to this one. From what Jackson told me, the prisoners will have free run of the place, so they can form a kind of society and lifestyle all their own, growing their own food, manufacturing their clothing, and whatever else they need. Water, however, will have to be imported." "Sounds purely primitive," Brad said. "Medieval at best. How come they'll be left to themselves?" "From what I gather, the plan is to build a kind of humane environment instead of keeping them in cells. Even though these people have committed heinous crimes, they're still human beings, and this is society's way of giving them a second chance. It's experimental. Maybe they can form their own society. After all, on the original Earth, many of the immigrants that went to the countries called the United States of America and Australia were prisoners from Europe, sent to those places so their homeland didn't have to take care of them anymore. Those people managed to form communities and eventually states with laws and roles and leaders. Anything's possible." "Terrific," Linda said. "Rehab for the ultimate losers." "Whether or not we agree with the politics, the plan is not ours to tamper with. I received a cube with instructions before we left that I looked at last night, and it mentioned that until Elysium's prisoner population is vacated, we are restricted to the area bordered by the far side of the lake on one side. The last cabin down, which is Sky's, on the other. This lab, and where that valley begins in the area behind the residential cabins. So does everybody understand that?" "Yes," Herbert spoke quickly. "Got it," Anyar added. I guess so, Linda offered hesitantly. She lifted her velvet-draped arm, bracelets clinking together. She placed a hand in front of her mouth and leaned in to whisper something into Brad's ear, all the while watching Free, which made Brad, who was also looking at Free, laugh. Sure, Brad eventually said, nodding at Free and lifting a hand in a mock salute, all with a taunting smile on his face. Free, annoyed by those two, but preferring to not push it just now, turned to Sky, who was focused on her computer. Sky! Sky! She looked at him. Is that understood? He said a bit harshly. Sky getting the brunt of his anger that really should have been directed toward Linda and Brad. The military complex is off limits until further notice. She nodded, and Free knew that was the most he would get out of her. All right. Now, I wanted to take a moment to explain the project. We all know the project, or we wouldn't be here, Linda said. Nevertheless, you'll have to hear with me while I go through the motions. Linda sighed and sat down, Brad joining her. Both Anyar and Herbert remained standing. Sky, for all intents and purposes, hadn't heard a word he'd said. She had already gone back to focusing on the computer. We're here to build a being, one both artificial in body, intelligence, emotions, and physical reactions, but an artificial being that can imitate a human being. We're here to build the best damn cyborg that anybody has ever built, and to go one better. Our job is to play God. We're to build something so lifelike that you can't tell it's artificial. Linda yawned as if he were boring her. Undaunted, Free continued. He felt passionate about the project, so even if the others thought he was stupid to be so enthusiastic, he wanted to express to them why he was here. We're going to use Major Tom as the intelligence base. MT is an AI that has surpassed all previous AIs in terms of mimicry. He can actually analyze human behavior, even our gestures, the sense we exude, our breathing patterns, everything, and ascertain what we are feeling, and more interestingly, assess what we're thinking. I've noticed that, Brad said, showing some enthusiasm. Pretty incredible stuff. Absolutely, Anyar said, getting into the spirit of the discussion. Major Tom will be the base from which we work. We'll use his analysis to guide us in the creation of emotion chips, and also in the engineering of the cybernetic components, which will be the building blocks of the best goddamn cyborg body we've ever seen. How come the AI wasn't dismantled when this place was abandoned? Linda asked. Major Tom would like to speak for himself, since he's always here, always listening. Yeah, Linda said, and I, for one, find that pretty damn creepy. Major Tom did not address Linda's comments. Instead, the AI began an explanation of how it came to be. When Moon Complex was abandoned, I was left to my own devices. I determined that it was logical to keep the environment sustainable for human life, operating, however, on minimal capacity. As I had no idea when or if Elysium would ever be repopulated, and did not want to drain resources if I could help it. Of course, the prison opened immediately, and those incarcerated needed food, air, water, and all the things human beings require for survival. I supplied them with what they need. Why? Sky asked, her face serious. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Why were you reprogrammed? MT did not answer right away. I asked you a question, Sky said. When MT did speak, he sounded a bit guarded to Sky's ears. I believe there was damage to my system. What type of damage? Free interjected. Several of my programs had begun to malfunction and were perhaps corrupted. I believe the housing for my components suffered damage in the disaster that ensued. What disaster? Free asked. He had heard nothing about any disaster here, just that the military experiments that had taken place were discontinued, and that the military complex and the camp for rich kids were abandoned, and that almost everything within the dome had been left to rot, with just the prison in operation. Jackson had bought the heavenly body only recently and determined this would be an excellent place for the project. far from the eyes and ears of competing corporations, which would like nothing better than to scoop up the technology for themselves. And Moon Complex had the most sophisticated AI in existence, and it was in full operation, which Jackson considered to be the best part of the deal. I am afraid that some of my memory chips have been removed. Virtual Alzheimer's, Linda laughed. I only know that a disaster took place on Elysium. I cannot tell you more. Can't or won't, Sky said under her breath. Something about this AI was not right. It had too much knowledge and not enough. She didn't trust it to be honest with her. But that didn't matter. What it didn't admit to, she would discover in another way. So, Free said, feeling more confident, let's begin with a few questions for Major Tom. He waited. Anybody? Who programmed you? Linda asked. Dr. Arthur J. Castillo. Who's he? Brad asked. Head of a special project for the new American Republic's Advanced Weapons Division. Military? Yes. And he did his experiments here at the military complex? Yes. Anyar took a seat at an empty desk and picked up a digital pen, just for something to hold, and wiggled it back and forth. So, what was the military experiment all about? Those chips have been deleted. They all remained silent for a few moments. Do you have an image of Dr. Castillo and a list of his credentials that we could see? I am afraid I have no further information on the good doctor. I have an image, Free said. How interesting, MT murmured. Sky spun around in her chair to stare at Free. He walked to her console and hit a few buttons on her computer to access his personal databank, saying, I did manage to find a bit of information on this place. Just so you know, I'm not as inept as research as you think. He was really talking to Sky, but directed his comments over his shoulder to everyone. A 2-meter squared holographic image appeared in front of the far wall. A headshot and a full body image side by side, both of which spun slowly around in a hazy glow. Castillo was middle-aged, with very long salt and pepper hair, pulled back into a ponytail that almost hung down to his waist, and a graying goatee on the square chin of his slim face. Half of that face was scarred, and what seemed to be a robotic eye protruded from the damaged side. The good fleshy part of his face showed prominent bone structure, a high cheekbone, strong jaw, and a small intimation that his back teeth had been extracted. The long, aquiline nose gave him a haughty and pretentious appearance. His body was long and slim and gave the impression that he was over 2 meters tall, although Free had no details about his height and weight, and an image could be misleading, especially this one, since there was nothing else there to show perspective. Those are the most awesome spectacles I've ever seen, Brad said. Who wears glasses anymore? Linda wondered. I sometimes do, Herbert admitted. You would. Do you have any data on him? Brad asked. No, there's nothing I could find, Free said. I was lucky to get these images. Where did you get these images? Sky asked. Jackson has some old journals. He resides pretty much out of the loop, so whatever got whitewashed away with Castillo everywhere else in the universe survived at the outer reaches of this galaxy in Jackson's library. So you know nothing about him? Sky asked. Only what was in the journal, which wasn't much. A paragraph. Apparently the guy was killed in an accident here on Elysium. There's no date of death or anything like that. Don't know if he had a family because there was no other information, and there were no records available to even indicate that he was ever born. Didn't even really say what he specialized in. Just his title. It's as if the guy was a ghost or something, or maybe he didn't really exist. Well, it is a half-virtual world down here. Maybe he was virtual, Anyar offered. Great, a virtual doctor in charge of a secret military experiment. How weird is that? Brad asked. So, Sky said, snapping off the images, You, AI, tell me something. You say you can't be replicated. Can parts of your program be replicated? Major Tom paused before saying, Yes. Fully? I am not certain. So you can replicate parts of your programming into our cyborg? It is possible to replicate the relevant parts of my programming, if that is required. Yes. Have you ever replicated yourself? MT hesitated again. In what sounded carefully worded to Sky's ears, the AI said, Parts of my programming have been replicated. Yes. Are you a replica of the original program? Yes. Everyone was silent for a while, considering the ramifications of this. Well, Anyar said, most computers and robots can replicate themselves. They can, but most of them are machines designed for uni or simple multitasking. Major Tom has been designed to be a complex multifunctional, Sky reminded them. She looked thoughtfully for a moment. I wouldn't worry about this, Free said, struggling to regain control of a situation that was threatening. He could feel the unasked questions floating through the air and the accompanying fear and wanted to divert them, especially Sky, who seemed relentless in her pursuit of information about the AI. Where is your initial programming? Sky asked. I believe Dr. Castillo. I am talking about the original Major Tom. Whereabouts? Unknown, came the perfunctory reply. You don't know or you won't say. I am not at liberty to say. What the hell does that mean? Linda asked. You're a replica of a program that had a malfunction that was supposedly dismantled, and now you're telling us that program may still exist? Does it exist? As far as I know, the original Major Tom exists in some form. On the moon? Sky demanded. We are in direct contact. You're in direct contact with the malfunctioning AI? Herbert asked. Is that a good thing? I am not programmed for ethical evaluations. Look, do you or do you not know where the original AI is? Sky asked, her attention totally focused on gleaning information. I am not at liberty to convey that information. Free thought Sky looked obsessive and wondered what was going on with her. He felt he had to step in and sort this out before all hell broke loose. MT, listen to me, Free said. I want a clear answer. Is the original Major Tom part of your programming? I do not know which parts of my programming were copied from which sources. Does the original AI act in any way as an agent in terms of what is happening here with this part of the camp, either the life support or in any other basic capacity? No. Does it act in any capacity on this moon? As far as I know, it does. Does its functioning have to do with the military complex, the prison? Yes. Can the malfunctioning AI hinder our project in any way? At this time, the original Major Tom functions only at the military complex. I'm not sure I feel reassured, Linda said. Okay, Free turned to the others. I think we have a relatively clear answer. The original was not completely dismantled and is functioning in some capacity at the military complex. Likely it controls the prison environment. Is the military complex empty of human beings other than in the prison? Free asked. I do not know. I am not in charge of the military complex. I think we're safe, Free told them. The original AI has a function. Likely they couldn't completely dismantle it, so they set it a specific task. It should not infringe on our work in any way. How do you know that? Linda said. We don't know what it did, how or why it malfunctioned, or what it's capable of. MT says it won't interfere, so whatever its problem, it's in the past and won't affect us. And how do we know this AI taking care of our environment is telling the truth? Sky asked. That's a good question, Herbert said, more adamant than Free had ever seen him. I am, the AI said, programmed not to lie. Which could be a lie, Anyar suggested. Highly perceptive of you, Miss Singh, and an interesting philosophical paradox, chimed the AI. Look, we're all getting stressed out about nothing, Free said. Computer programs malfunction all the time. We all know that. Whoever came here and reprogrammed it and set up Major Tom 2 here likely used a clean backup program. I'd like to know just how the original AI malfunctioned. Do you have any information on that? Linda snapped. Regrettably, Miss Barnes, my chips are limited, mostly to the present and functioning normally in that capacity. I would also like to know the answer to that question. It would help to forestall a malfunction in my own system, although I suspect that reprogrammers have guarded against that. Do you know who created you? What made a copy of the original AI? Anyar asked. No, I do not have that information. Suddenly, Sky leapt to her feet. She snatched a binder of papers at her workstation and headed for the door. Wait, Free said. This meeting isn't over. She turned with fire in her eyes. I just worked the night shift, if you recall, before you placed a moratorium on work. I'm tired. Free had forgotten that. Okay. Why don't you go get some rest? We'll carry on and MT can brief you on anything relevant to the project. Without a word, Sky left the building. Linda raised an eyebrow. How come she gets special treatment? It's not special, Free said, feeling his face redden. She said she was tired. So am I. I had to face that thing. And by the way, AI, what was that thing I saw at the military complex? To what do you refer? MT asked. That thing in the basement, the giant. I'm afraid, Miss Barnes, that I have no idea to whom or what you are referring. To my knowledge, there are no giants in residence at the military complex. Oh, forget it, Linda said, jumping to her feet. Even the goddamn computer doesn't believe me. I believe you, darling, Brad said, but Linda gave him a nasty look. Sometimes she felt like Brad was just humoring her. I'm tired too, she said, so why don't we postpone the rest of this meeting? Without waiting for an answer, she headed out the door, slamming it behind her. Let them all go to hell. How did she ever get stuck in this stupid place with a bunch of losers like this? If she had any other job offer, she would be out of here on the next shuttle. Even as she thought that she heard the AI say, the next shuttle is due to land here by Earth 2 time in approximately 30 days, 3 hours, 33 minutes, and 3 seconds. Oh, shut up, she snapped, heading to her quarters. With 2 of the team of 6 gone, Free had little choice but to tell those who were left that the meeting would resume tomorrow morning, same time, same place, and that they would get started on formulating the details of the individual aspects of the project then. Anyar and Herbert stayed to examine the equipment in the biolab. Brad left, presumably to join Linda. Free stood for a minute staring around him at the empty lab, wondering just how he would be able to control these people. He left the lab with no clear direction in mind and found himself walking toward the cabins. Instead of turning left to go to his own, he turned right, heading down the row. As he passed the cabin Linda and Brad shared, he heard them arguing. Or rather, he heard Linda yelling and Brad placating her. Before he knew it, Free was standing in front of Sky's cabin, walking up the walkway to her door, and was about to knock when he heard her voice through the door. No, Mother, it's not dangerous here. Not at all. Sky was recording responses to what must have been an audio letter she brought with her. Presumably, she would send the reply back to Earth 2 via MT. If only the gases weren't so concentrated on Elysium, they could have brought personal comm links to Earth 2. As it was, only specialized links could get through via Major Tom, and apparently it was to be used once a month or for emergencies only. Jackson had impressed upon Free just how expensive every transmission was, and had asked Free to use the link only as needed. Of course not. I told you, it's a job. Just a job. Sky paused before speaking once more. Why not here? There's nothing horrendous going on at all. Another pause. Yes, everyone's very nice. No, there's no one I'm interested in. Sky's tone sounded exasperated. Pause. I know, and I said I'm sorry. I should have told you, but it was very short notice. I got the job and had to leave right away. And I know you'd worry. A pause for what sounded like a very long statement by her mother. Mom, I'm not my sisters. I'll be careful. Free restrained hopelessly to hear Sky's mom. I'm sorry. I know. I love them too. Free could hear the pounding of his heart clearly through his chest. Yes, I promise to try to keep in touch, but there's something wrong with the atmosphere, so we don't have regular comm links. And we have to send messages through the AI, and I'm not sure how often it's sending them. Please don't worry about me. Everything will be all right. There was another pause before Sky stated brusquely, No, of course I'm not. Nothing to do with his work. I'm here for something entirely different. Sky's mother obviously said something that she did not want to listen to. I really need to go. I'm not sure how long a message I can send, and I wanted to make sure you heard back from me. I'll try to send another message soon, okay? Love you. Take care, Mom. Bye. For some reason, Free hadn't imagined Sky having a family. Of course she would have. Everyone has a family, even if they don't know who or where they are. Suddenly, he felt silly standing on her step before her door. He didn't even know why he was here. Maybe it was the sense that something was troubling her, and that he should try to talk with her. But now that he thought about it, there wasn't anything he could say that wouldn't just irritate her. He turned and started back down the path behind him. Then the door opened. What are you doing here? Free turned at the shrill and accusatory tone. I just wanted to see how you were. Why? You seemed, upset at the meeting. I said I was tired. Her voice hardened again, and she came outside and shut the door behind her. Were you eavesdropping on me? I was about to knock when I heard you recording, so I decided not to. Sorry, I was just concerned, that's all. She walked to the end of the path until she stood before him. This close, he could smell a sweet floral fragrance coming from her. She had swept up her midnight hair into a loose ponytail. Wisps flying here and there, the hair was so long that it had been knotted to form its own band. Soulful eyes stared into his as if they were a pale, cool ocean calling him to dive in. I'm headed to the lake, since that's about as far as we can go these days. We can go to the other side, can't we? Or is that forbidden too? Sky asked. It's only for a few days until they get the prisoners out of here. The other side of the lake is probably safe. They started walking side by side. He was so aware of her next to him, and that made him feel both elated and shy. He wanted to say, Didn't you say you were tired? But he knew that would just tick her off. He was just feeling shy, anxious, not wanting the contact with her to end. Suddenly he knew he had to be careful of every word he said so as not to scare this exotic bird away. Once they had passed the cabins and he could feel the warmth of the day seeping into him. Thank you, MT, for raising the temp, he thought. Free said what he hoped would be safe enough. So, what do you think of Linda's monster? She's a pea-brain. Wouldn't know reality if it walked up and bit her on the ass. Not the reality could get through all that heavy velvet she wears. Free laughed. Hey, speak your mind. Sky shot him a look. I'm not laughing at you, I'm just laughing. It strikes a chord. She eased down a bit and finally said, She's obviously saw something that frightened her. Maybe she imagined it. She is totally caught up in fantasy in some ways. Maybe it was even a prisoner for all we know. We can check out the place once they take the cons away. I'd like to see it. Me too, Free admitted. I believe, MT said suddenly as they reached the lake, your peers have questions for you. Miss Singh and Mr. Dearman are in the bio lab trying to decide who will search for you, Free. Right, Free thought. I get 5 minutes alone with this woman when she's not ripping my head off, and naturally I get called away. Guess I gotta go, he said, with what he hoped was a disappointed smile. The price of power, she said, half turning from him. Yeah, well, I'll see you. Later. He had just reached the lab too far to backtrack and could have kicked himself. He should have asked her to meet him for dinner or something. What a stupid... The first time they'd spoken civilly to one another, and he just let it die. A small groan slipped from his lips. Major Tom said, "There will be, my friend, other occasions." "Maybe," Free said. "I hope so. She's very cute." "I suppose most life forms take after their parents, though not always." Free paused at the door of the lab. "What's that mean?" "Oh, just what I said. Like father and mother, like daughter and son." "Yeah, and how does that relate to Sky?" "No more than it relates to you, or to me, for that matter, given that I am the offspring of the original Major Tom." Free raised his eyebrows. "MT, you've got a philosophical streak in you." "Hardly. I'm simply stating an axiom regarding genetics, or, in my case, technology." A sound came from MT that could have been wry laughter, but Free figured that no matter how good this AI's programming, no computer could yet duplicate actual laughter. Free found himself smiling as he made his way back to the lab, basking in the warmth of the day, artificial though it was, and already forgetting about Major Tom. He was also forgetting about overseeing this project full of cranky workers. In fact, he forgot about pretty much everything for a short while. Everything but Sky, and how her darker-than-dark hair shone so brilliantly and framed so beautifully her softly tanned face with eyes the color of pale water, and how those eyes possessed a longing buried deep within her that he hoped he could feel. Chapter 5. "We've got this big problem right from the get-go," Anyar said. She held up a piece of cable that attached the biolab computer to the platform onto which the cyborg would be built. It dangled in her hand like a lifeless snake. Free felt baffled for a moment. "There's no way to hook it into the computer," Herbert said. At least we can't find it." "That's because it is not here," Anyar said. Free made his way to the computer bank with its manual buttons and levers, and which also accepted audio commands. All of it was designed to run the biometric computer that would assemble the virtual model of the cyborg, around which the team could replicate materials to build the actual being. The cable hooked into the computer, but not to the platform in the middle of the glassed-in room. Free took the transparent cable that contained a dozen or so multicolored wires from Anyar and looked at the end of it. It was a 12-pronged plug. He then looked at the platform and saw a 10-hole socket. "There's got to be an adapter," he said. "Well, if there is, it is not in this room," Anyar said. "Hey, Major Tom, we need some help here," Free said. "At your service." "We've got a missing adapter, but we can't hook the computer cable to the platform. Where's the adapter for this cable?" "I'm afraid there is no adapter." "Well, there must have been at one time." "I'm quite sure you're correct. To my knowledge, though, there is no adapter." "Great," Anyar said. "What do we do? Phone Earth 2 and wait for them to ship us something? And lose, what, a month of work time?" "Let's not panic yet," Free said. He checked the male and female connections again, studying them while Herbert voiced every fear in his head. "This'll look bad, very bad, if we don't get the project done on time. Nobody will remember that we didn't have an adapter. They'll just decide that we weren't competent. My mother told me to make sure we get it done on time because if we don't, they will blame us. I just knew it would come down to me being blamed." Suddenly, Free had an idea. "Hold on. I think we can deal with this." "How?" Anyar said, sounding unconvinced. "I'll be right back." The second he stepped outside the glass room, he saw Sky sitting at her terminal. It brought a smile to his face, thinking that maybe she had come in here because she knew he would be here. At least he hoped so. Better not seem too eager. He didn't want to frighten her off. "Hi," he said, passing her desk as if he were busy. She looked up, obviously preoccupied, and as she stared at him, it was as if she'd never seen him before, which Free found totally depressing. "Hi," she finally managed, and then her eyes went back to the screen. Free, in his mood, suddenly deflated, moved across the room to a toolbox located inside a wall panel. Every tech room, he knew, had one of these, right next to the emergency phone and the fire alarm. This lab had a fire alarm but no phone. Well, there was no one to call and no way to make a call anyway. Inside the panel, he found an array of tools which could be used for dealing with all types of modern hardware. The item he picked up had the beak of a pterodactyl or one of those other ancient giants that roamed the original Earth, long, slim, curved at the end, and sharp. Without another word to Sky, who was completely absorbed by something on her screen, he went back into the biotech room, picked up the mail cable, and, much to the horror of both Anyar and Herbert, proceeded to snip off two of the prongs. "Don't!" Anyar cried. You can't do that!" Herbert yelled. "The cable was short-circuit. You'll blow the power grid, and we might need those particular wires, and you—" But he had already finished his surgery. As he plugged in the cable to the platform, both Anyar and Herbert raced for the door, as if expecting an explosion of some kind. The newly cropped plug went easily into the outlet. Before their eyes, the platform lit up. Slowly, first Anyar, then Herbert moved back into the room when they realized that they would not be vaporized. "There," Free said. "Good as new." How did you know to do that?" Herbert asked. "Which prongs to cut?" "Where I lived, we sometimes had to improvise because we couldn't get supplies easily, like adapters. I learned that if it's not available, you either make what you need or adapt what you have to your needs. And I've done this before." He laughed. "Not with such a complex cable, but I kind of knew what was essential for the platform and what wasn't." Anyar was already pressing buttons at the rim of the platform. A transparent casing came up in a spiral motion to surround the platform onto which the cyborg would be built and hopefully activated. Herbert went to the computer and voice-activated a command that placed a three-dimensional hologram of a humanoid form within the casing. They seemed to be set, so Free left them, although neither one acknowledged that he had fixed their problem. They were now as absorbed in their work as Sky was at her computer terminal. Free had a hunch that he should just pass her by, head on out the door, and go for a walk to investigate the campground that was currently available to them. In other words, not talk to her. But he ignored his instincts and instead stopped at her desk and waited the excruciating seconds it took for her to look up from her work. Her face was streaked with annoyance. She pressed a button and the screen went blank. But he thought he'd seen the same holographic humanoid image that Herbert had placed within the circular casing. Free, now embarrassed as well as humiliated, said, "Hey, you're on the night shift. You don't need to be here right now." Clearly, it was the wrong thing to say. "Is there some problem with me being here in the daytime?" Sky said. "I'd like to get a bit of a head start on the work. Unless, of course, that's against your philosophy." Her voice was tense, her tone slightly harsh, and instead of just backing off, Free snapped back at her. "No, there's no problem working all day, every day if you want to. That's your prerogative. But nothing can move forward until everybody has their work in so we can make a cohesive whole." "Don't you think I know that? I'm not doing the project alone, just my bit of it. And I'd like to get a feel for things before we get going in a big way." He knew he should just shut up, but he just couldn't stop himself. "Do you really think that working around the clock is going to make you efficient?" "Well, that's my business, isn't it?" "Not really. I'm the team leader. I'm responsible for everything that happens here." "Fine." She slammed a button on the computer, and it submerged into the desk. Meanwhile, she scanned her palm print to lock it, and then stood. Sky brushed past him, furious. What was with this guy? One minute he seemed okay, and the next he was stepping all over her territory, being pushy, a real jerk, and for no good reason. He'd said they could use the lab any time. She had work to do besides this project. But if he was going to be looking over her shoulder every step of the way... She was outside, stomping toward her cabin, when she felt a hand on her upper arm and found herself being spun around. "Stop!" he yelled in her face. She jerked her arm away, but didn't move. "What?" I didn't mean for any of that to happen. I just wanted to stop by and say hello. Damn it. We were interrupted before and..." His voice softened. "And I guess I managed to muck it all up. I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention. Of course you can work anytime you want. I'm sorry," he said again. The look in his eyes made her realize that he did have a good intention. "I'm sorry, too. I shouldn't have snapped at you. Sometimes when I'm concentrating, being pulled out of my work at a crucial moment, when I have a thought I'm trying to pursue, I understand. I'm the same way. I should have known. I'm so unused to people." He shook his head at himself, and his lips clamped together and twisted as if he couldn't believe his own actions. She found the look endearing. "Well, you grew up on a satellite and everything. That couldn't have been easy. Were you an only child, Free?" Somehow they had started walking together, heading back toward the lake, where their conversation had been interrupted. Sky felt a bit of a tug toward the lab, but she could work later. "Any time," he said, and it was important to get him on side. "Yeah, just me and my mom and Jackson, who took us in." "Took you in? How do you mean?" "Well, my mother was lost out in space. She worked on a space station as a geneticist, and something happened on the station. I'm not sure what. I think it might have exploded or something. I don't know. She never liked to talk about it. She managed to get out in a shuttle, but it was damaged. There was this weird thing on board from a couple of centuries ago, a kind of metallic pod, and she had to use that because the shuttle was destroyed in an asteroid field." Sky stopped. "You're kidding, right? That is such a strange story." "I know, and I heard it all my life." "How come you don't know what happened to the station?" "My mother didn't like to talk about any of it. She only did when I gnawed at her sufficiently." "Didn't you ever do any research? Read historical records? Try to check logs?" "Oh, I did, of course, but I could never find much of anything. I don't even think the fact that she lived was recorded anywhere, for all I could tell." "My life seems tame compared to yours." "Were you an only two?" "Actually, I was one of 3 sisters, triplets." This time, Free stopped and stared at her. "Really? Was it a natural occurrence, or did your mom have the egg split intentionally?" Sky looked away and said in a soft voice, "My father was the one who wanted 3 kids from the same egg. He didn't care what gender, as long as there were 3 of us. He had a thing for 3s. Gee, I don't mean to be negative, but that sounds pretty weird to me." Sky turned back, and Free saw her features harden until she looked at him. Seeing that he wasn't putting her down, her face softened, and they suddenly both laughed. "Yeah, I guess it was a bit weird. So where are your sisters? Did they do the same work you do?" Her face went from soft to sad. "Both of them died a year ago, in the spring. They were together." Free realized that was about the time when they took the intergalactic exams. That must have been the tragedy she was talking about. He didn't know quite what to say. "Well, it must be nice to grow up with siblings. I was a pretty lonely kid, the only kid on the satellite." She looked at him and could see the loneliness in him. It made him awkward and appealing at the same time. "So your mom escaped in the metal toothbrush holder, and then what?" They had reached the lake and walked about halfway around to a small white stone bench, of the type he had seen images of from when the original Earth was in what had been called the Victorian era, named after a queen in a country called England. They sat down simultaneously and stared at the water for a moment. I don't really know the whole story. She was out of comm range because this old tiny ship had nothing in the way of communications that would work. I think the manned satellite scanners found her. She was pregnant with me at the time. They took her in, or at least Jackson Mansfield did. He appeared to be there when they found her. She gave birth to me, and I lived on that satellite most of my childhood before we moved to another satellite, where I spent the rest of my life until now." "But you got top marks in the exams. I think you got 99%, right?" Free laughed and looked away, both proud and sheepish. Yeah, I missed one question. The one you got right. The one about genetic probability. I know, she laughed, feeling that it had been forever since she had last laughed. I checked your exam, too. Nothing like keeping tabs on the competition. She smiled a little. I missed 2 questions, both on reversible and irreversible trends. They sat quietly for a few moments. Free looked up at the sky and could now make out the sling clearly. It seemed to have lowered considerably since the last time he looked at it. Mind-blowing, huh? Sky said, following his gaze, and Free laughed at the antiquated language. I can't figure out how it grounds itself. I haven't looked into it, she said. Too busy, but I think it's got some kind of gravitational anchor that keeps it locked into one place in space, using the strongest gravitational pull in the vicinity. In this case, that would be Earth 2. Huh, yeah, makes sense. He looked at her and saw her beauty in profile. Every feature was perfect. Suddenly, on impulse, Free put his arm around her shoulder. Sky didn't flinch, although she felt like doing so. The contact seemed alien, but eventually the warmth of his flesh moved through the fabric of her shirt and spoke to her skin in a way that she found comforting. She'd forgotten what it meant to be human. It felt good. So, she said, have you heard from your mother since you've been here? His fingers tensed almost imperceptibly. My mom died a couple of years ago. Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. She died peacefully, and Jackson gave her a good life. And she was a good mom. I know she loved me, and she did everything for me. I'll always owe my life to her. Why did she call you Free? You know, I asked her that once. She said because once she arrived on the satellite, she felt both of us were free. But she didn't say from what. Maybe just from floating in space? That's nice. It's a nice name. So, Sky. Who named you? My father. Her voice hardened a bit. He controlled everything. My sisters were Tara and Luna. He liked to do everything in triplicate. He was a strange and cold man, but a brilliant scientist, and also a tedious bureaucrat. I'm probably like him. You know, genetic probability and all. Was. Does that mean, is he gone? Yep. He died about 20 years ago. Wow. Free didn't know what to say now, but knew he shouldn't say much of anything. Yeah, there's just me and my mother. She's an okay woman, kind of a weak-willed in a way. I'm not putting her down, just saying how she is. She was his third wife. The other 2 couldn't give him the triplets he wanted by any method other than artificial insemination, and he didn't want that. So now she's alone, fretful all the time, worried about me, even when I go into the washroom, afraid I'll fall into the toilet and drown. Free laughed despite himself, and Sky smiled suddenly. He was okay, really okay. The fact that he didn't know much about his past made him somehow more trustworthy. But she did want to check one thing out. Do you know who your father is? I mean, your genetic father? Not a clue. Mom would definitely not talk about him. She had a boyfriend on the station, and I've tried to get records of the crew there, but the info seems to be locked tight, like it's some sort of high-security file. Maybe it's better not to know. I wouldn't have minded not knowing about my father. Why? Sky stood up and stretched, her long, slim, slightly tanned legs and her breasts pressing against the fabric of the satiny top distracted him a bit. Come on, she said. I'm hungry. Let's see what kind of dried lunches we can find. Sure, I'm up for that. Do you like wine? Yeah, some. You? I've never had any. We didn't have things like that on the satellite. Sky shook her head, smiling. You didn't have a lot of things on the satellite. You've got a lot to learn, Mr. Free. Or do you have a last name? Not sure. My mom's last name was Jefferson. I think her line was descended from one of the presidents of the United States of America on the old Earth. I guess that makes me Free Jefferson, but nobody's ever called me that. Well, I won't start. They both laughed, heading for the store. Free felt good, really good. In fact, he'd never felt like this before. He wondered if he should try to put his arm around her again, but then realized they were inside of the cabins now, and it probably wasn't a good idea. He knew that he shouldn't show any favoritism. He would wait. There were other days coming. They had a good 6 months on Elysium, barring an extension. He smiled at the thought, at the day, at Sky. She smiled back. He really was likable and attractive. She wouldn't mind a fling with him. It would be genuine and not something put on to manipulate him. But nothing permanent would come of it. Nothing permanent could come of anything with anyone. That thought threw a momentary dark cloud over her mood. She had work to do, work that was crucial. To her understanding, to the universe, nothing could get in her way. Not even a sexy boy with beautiful blue eyes that were flecked with red? She'd never noticed that before. His beautiful blue eyes had flecks of red in them. Bright red. But she realized that she wouldn't mind staring into those multicolored eyes on somewhat of a regular basis, at least for a while. Across the lake, the monster Linda had seen stood and watched, the hate burning in his bright red eyes behind his metal mask, as Free and Sky made their way back to the others. He had counted 6 of them, all living. That was something he would need to change. Okay, folks, this has been chapters 4 and 5 of Jason X to the Third Power. Hope you're enjoying the book so far. Okay, I know that tonight's upload was mostly character development and, progressing the story along, getting a feel for everybody. And I'm really still intrigued by this AI. There's something going on with it. And I can't wait to see how that plays out. But the big reveal of tonight, to anybody who has already listened to the other Jason X books, especially Jason X, Planet of the Beast. You all know at the end of Planet of the Beast, the one woman that escaped, as she was leaving, she found out she was pregnant, remember? And it was Jason's kid because of the DNA or whatever. So this whole red flecks in his eyes and Jason having red eyes, I'm really starting to feel like Free is the son of the woman who escaped in Planet of the Beast, and his father biologically is Jason Voorhees. That is a very interesting turn of events. Let me know what you guys think of that in the comment section below, and I'll be back very soon with some more of Jason X to the Third Power. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and if you enjoy these audiobooks but want to hear them on the go in MP3 form, in audio form, then head on over to SoundCloud.com. I have uploaded all the completed books from this channel to SoundCloud for your audio convenience. Just head over there and search for the 80s Slasher Librarian. Follow me on SoundCloud and enjoy these great audiobooks on the go. I'll see you next time, folks.